everything is dour and sad and grey and depressing. It's like living in a 24 state of Birmingham. So we thought we'd have some fun laughing at the sorry state of pop culture. And with that, you have some words to say about the most recent Halloween film, which I've not watched. I didn't realise that this was one of your articles about Halloween Kills, which was they did the reboot, which was Halloween 2018, was it? Then Halloween Kills, which I heard was just schlocky trash, and then Halloween Ends, which is the most recent one. I've not seen any of these, because I don't care.
I wanted to briefly point out that I am a bit of a horror buff, and
as you should be. Horror is great.
My personal timeline is Halloween 1, Halloween 2, Halloween H20. The Halloween timeline is convoluted
of the
and
many different
impossible.
branches it takes.
Get rid of the Busta Rhymes one. Anyway, so they did a 2018 reboot.
Busta Rhymes.
Yeah, he defeats
again,
Michael Myers with kung fu and electroshocks him in the testicles.
There's a Nightmare on Elm Street where Freddy Krueger raps, so anything's possible.
And he plays Super Nintendo with the Power Glove. So, with the 2018 Halloween, it was marketed as a Me Too era horror movie. So, what happens is her daughter...
Man bad?
Her daughter and her granddaughter. Her granddaughter has a pass made at her by a sort of creepy, slubbish guy, and immediately after the attempted fumble kiss where he didn't ask for consent, Michael Myers impales him and murders him. And
so Michael Myers is just
he's a male feminist.
He's the embodiment of female rage.
Unironically. So they play up this idea that vigilantism and murderous Halloween villain Michael Myers and other sorts of serial killers are justified in killing so long as it's their enemies. So Jamie Lee Curtis, when questioned at the premiere for Halloween 2018, said that the writers and co-writers and directors concurred that #MeToo and Time's Up trends were very much part of the conversation and the production process. Take Oscar, for example, who attempts to kiss Allison right before being righteously rebuffed with a lecture on consent, and then, when she storms off, Michael Myers impales him through the throat. So then if you go to Halloween Kills, a couple of years after, obviously it was made during the pandemic.
That doesn't sound entertaining at all.
No, it's not. It's rubbish. Halloween Kills was based on, quote, January 6th. So a Guardian interview with Jamie Lee Curtis compared Michael Myers to a Trumpian provocateur, only with a carving knife instead of Twitter. Curtis then compared the mob hunting Myers to the unsupervised tour of Capitol Hill on January the 6th. And in this article here, we can see how it's going with Halloween Ends, which is just released. So she says that Laurie Strode is a feminist hero, and we want to focus on the women's voices in the narrative. So she's a whore. Well, she does conceive her only child in this through a one-night stand at a truck stop.
Makes perfect sense. I can see what they're doing here. I can see it's very transparent because it has often been criticised that horror films, especially from the 70s and 80s, around the time you get to the slasher period, are rather reactionary in the way that they structure their plot, oftentimes because one of the first people to die in all of the narratives is the woman who is coded to be a whore.
They're indictments of promiscuous sexual morality.
They make fun of this in Joss Whedon's Cabin in the Woods and other such things, where it's kind of paying homage to it rather than just saying this is a bad thing to happen. Whereas what this is trying to do is trying to flip that on its head and turn the whore, the promiscuous character, into the hero and indict the male characters for being perverts. And, I'm more than happy to indict male perv characters.
Yes, but then it becomes, aren't you a redneck Trumpian? You should be destroyed.
I'm sorry to say that it's the male feminists you should be going after in that case.
I don't think Michael Myers is going to listen to you. In Halloween Kills, this is the one that Curtis is talking about right here, there is a massive bait and switch of where Michael Myers is only in about 15 minutes of the entire film. The rest of it follows a babysitter who accidentally led to the deaths of one of the kids he's sitting. Then he dates Laurie Strode's granddaughter, who, even though her mum was killed in the final seconds of the last one, seems to be totally over it, and now dating an actual convicted killer, even though her mum and grandmum are terrified of a convicted serial killer and they move out of the way. And then he goes into the sewers after being the town pariah and takes Michael Myers' mask, overpowers him, and becomes a copycat killer.
Wait, he overpowers Michael?
Yeah, Michael Myers is really weak and he's been living on sewer rats and people. In the last few minutes, Michael Myers gets impaled by Jamie Lee Curtis with a fridge and blades. She slits his wrists, makes him bleed out, and then throws him into a car compactor, and then credits.
See, I always thought the thing was that obviously in the original Halloween, Michael Myers has a kind of backstory because you got that POV opening sequence. It's really great. But other than that, he's kind of more of a force of nature. He shouldn't be living in the sewers.
Timeline you go on. This movie only goes with the first movie, so they go with the force of nature timeline, and they completely undo it with this film. If you go with 2, H2O, the lot, he's actually out to kill his family, either because he's got a blood rune with the mark of the thorn, which means he's fulfilling a prophecy, or he just wants to kill his sister.
Stupid horror
It's
sequel
convoluted
contrivances.
nonsense. Yeah. So that was how it was starting, right? It started off with strong political messaging, and how it's ended is the fans have launched a petition to reshoot the entire movie because it's that bad. And the director has acknowledged it and said, "Oh, I'm disappointed that people didn't like it." And Jamie Lee Curtis has said, "I kind of hate this franchise now, and I'm never coming back."
Why did you keep coming back then? Oh, it's for the money, obviously.
Yeah, funnily enough, in Halloween Resurrections, so H2O was meant to finish it. She only came back for Resurrections because she said, if you kill me within 30 seconds, you've got to pay me millions of dollars for a cameo. And they did it, and they actually went over her cameo, and so they paid her even millions more, and she donated it to charity. So at the time...
That's not a bad
credible.
thing. That's all right.
Yeah, so obviously this is a change.org position, so it won't really go anywhere, but it is quite funny that it's fulfilled what John Carpenter said about the first one, which is that Halloween has the illusion of depth, but it has absolutely no political relevance whatsoever, because people kept trying to do feminist readings.
That's coming from John Carpenter, who does have overtly political films and would not be afraid of making it known if that was the intention. But it's very obvious, the first one, he just had like 50 books in his back pocket, was like, I want to make a movie, and I went out and bought this really hideous-looking Captain Kirk mask. What can I do with this?
Yep. And so, lesson, don't insert politics where they don't belong, and your franchise won't capsize again. Let's go on to comics, shall we? Because it's one of our mutual loves. We've got some sad news here, because I thought we'd go through first this year being a horrendous year for creators both at Marvel and DC, because loads of our favourites are dying, and they're leaving us with a load of crap in their wake.
Sad to say, yeah.
So first of all, we have Kevin Conroy, who is pretty much everyone's favourite Batman. There's always the joke of, who's your favourite Batman, other than Kevin Conroy? Because, of course, he's the default option for
If you're familiar with
acting.
Batman the Animated Series,
the
Batman
Arkham
games, and a lot of other...
Injustice.
Injustice. Plenty of things involving Batman. Kevin Conroy has been the voice of him, and is, for me, and many others, the definitive voice of Batman. When I read the comic books, it's Kevin's voice I'm reading them in. Yeah,
he's passed away age 66, cancer, unfortunately. We've got a couple of tributes here, just because I thought I'd highlight them. The Empire State Building did light up with the bat signal in the next Twitter tab, John, which I thought was nice.
That's pretty nice.
That's very wholesome. I thought that was good. And in the next one, this is just a random artist on Instagram, but he did do Mark Hamill's Joker crying, saying goodbye, old friend. So I thought I'd give you all some tearjerkers. It's a shame Mark Hamill's an awful person. I decided not to bring up his tweet, but... yeah, we're losing some of the good ones. If we go on to the next one, sorry to depress you, George Perez has died as well. The man who reinvented the Teen Titans, wrote and reinvented Wonder Woman, just did some incredible work with Crisis on Infinite Earths, the Justice League, JLA, Avengers crossover, Marvel vs. DC.
Very influential man, great artist.
And really wholesome, judging by all his interviews and his Comic-Con interactions.
That's nice.
An actual gentleman. And my favourite comic book panels of all time, even though I don't much love the Wonder Woman run, is how Wonder Woman dealt with Ares in issue 7, of where she wraps the lasso of truth around Ares and makes him realise if he wages a global war, then no human beings will be around to instill him with belief. And so Ares goes from cackling maniacally to sitting on the throne of skulls, crumbling to dust, and in real life he just cries.
Oh, really?
And that's how she settles it. Yeah, she doesn't go, I believe in love, I will destroy you, and hits him with lightning. She talks him down off the ledge. We will cover it at some point on Comics Corner, I swear.
Oh, brilliant.
So then Neil Adams has also died. Sorry about this. It's rough. He's with Kevin Conroy here. Neil Adams, again, is the man who redefined the Joker, redefined Batman, invented a lot of dynamic art styles in his X-Men run.
Massive influence on creators like Frank Miller, who did Dark Knight Returns and Daredevil.
Yep, he worked with Denny O'Neil, who's also recently passed. He worked with Len Wein.
Denny O'Neil went as well?
Denny O'Neil went about 2 years ago.
Oh, bloody hell.
Yeah, Len Wein died a few years ago as well, creator of Swamp Thing, one of my favourite creators. We're just losing all the good ones, unfortunately. If we go to the next one, this one really hit me. Tim Sale. The man who did Long Halloween, Dark Victory, Catwoman When in Rome, one of the most beautiful painted artists. Read his
Very
solo
distinctive.
issue. His solo issue #1 is excellent. He did Superman Kryptonite with Darwin Cook. Just seriously, Superman for All Seasons, limitless talent. And we're just losing the actual genuine titans of the industry far too early. Alan Grant as well. Man who did Shadow of the Bat, spearheaded Nightfall. Did loads of Detective Comics issues, invented characters like Anarchy, also died this year. And finally, very recently, Carlos Pacheco, artist on The Flash, X-Men, Justice League, passed away very
60
quietly.
years old as well.
Yeah,
same with Conroy, that's way too young.
Yeah, they're all around their 60s.
Far too young.
And it's just tragic because we're losing all the best ones. And in its wake, we've left utterly dead culture, like Black Panther. And if you would like to skip watching the first one, I advise you do not pay to watch the second one. Instead, give your cinema ticket money to us, because you can go and watch me and Harry explain why it's the worst film ever made. I'm going to hands down say, or at least one of the worst films ever made, because it actively hates you. But instead, it made $1 billion. Yeah, it made $1 billion worldwide, and there's now a new one out. And rather than faithful adaptations to the character, you're going to be hit over with political messaging endlessly, and that's what comics and movies have turned into. So,
I think it's really important to just hammer home the point that with Black Panther, Killmonger,
yes,
Eric Killmonger, the main bad guy from that film, was seen by many, and this is both
including Chadwick Boseman himself, as an aspirational character, as potentially the real good guy, because he wanted to kill Whitey, genocide global Whitey, as and their
reparations
children
for slavery, which he never experienced, his dad and ancestors never experienced. You could make the argument, well, in the film, his mum's contextualized to be an American black woman. That doesn't actually necessarily mean that she had ancestors who were slaves either, because she could be, past the point of slavery and migrated.
I'm sorry, I'm not even willing to negotiate. As soon as you say we're going to kill the colonizers and their children by giving space weapons to the projects, no, there's no negotiation. You're a genocidal nutcase, and the fact that the so-called hero of this narrative feels more kinship with him than the noble isolationist African king speaks volumes to, unfortunately, the animosity raised up by activist groups that black Americans have to their white neighbours. It's worrying. However, the second one may not make as much money. If we go over to why, the Chinese have just said no. No thanks. We don't want Black Adam, even though it's not that woke. It did have one AD-odd line in there, like really bad dubbed line about how the international white people are basically invading Middle East and extracting their resources and blah 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 blah. It was throwaway, and the Chinese just gone Wakanda forever. What? Sorry, it's about Africans. Not
we don't like that round.
Not a fan, thanks. So, Beijing regulators have seldom publicly announced or explained their decisions when denying a foreign movie permission to screen in local theatres, forcing studios and local fans alike to wait, speculate, and hope. But several sources inside the Chinese industry tell The Hollywood Reporter that both Black Panther 2 and Black Adam are believed to have little chance of winning approval at this stage. And of course, they said it's probably because of various Marvel
economic reasons.
Various Marvel actors have criticised China's treatment of the Uyghur Muslims or Taiwan. I'm sure it's got absolutely nothing to do with them being racist as all hell. You obviously referenced the fact that they've done a poster for Black Panther 2 should they want to release it. Should we take a look? Just the next one. Oh, right. There we
go. I do think this is just one of a series of character posters that Marvel have released for it. But
I thought it just written in Mandarin.
Yeah. Given what they did to the Chinese poster for the original one, remember the original poster in the US and the rest of the West was Chadwick Boseman like this, whereas the Chinese poster was Chadwick Boseman like this
with the
his
helmet on.
So you couldn't see that it was a black guy.
And removing John Boyega from the Star Wars poster as well.
Oh well, no. Just making him really teeny tiny.
Speaking of erasing black men, it turns out Black Panther Wakanda Forever has done this because they didn't want to recast Chadwick Boseman. Fair enough. That's fine. That's
I
very
understand.
Respectful. Black men don't really like black women, though, so they're not really going to show up for it. And so they've pulled loads of merchandise because they're crapping their pants about
black
how
men
little money it might make.
Solidarity.
Yeah. So a reporter and insider who's dubbed himself Valiant Renegade, don't know how trustworthy this gentleman is, but Browningens Comics do often publish some fairly reliable leaks, said many licensed products manufacturers have cut back on their Black Panther products versus their more standard mapping for their categories with respect to what they would usually do with a property with an upcoming over $1 billion exposure push. This means either limiting Wakanda Forever's line depth and or smaller production runs. As to why Marvel was expressing such caution with Wakanda Forever's merchandising, Renegade turned to supposed focus group findings and explained that the company's fears stem from the fact that, quote, Black Panther is not a property or a mantle, but rather a very specific character whose appeal is very male, even more than usual. Noting that the superficial nature of these focus group results were the result of analysts having only looked at the character as part of the overall Avengers IP landscape, Renegade ultimately asserted that the key thing, though, was that all the male elements. Black men are even less likely to buy female IP-driven merch for either themselves or their sons. Fact. So they can't also apparently catch a break with Blade because there have been recent reports that Blade's Muslim reboot has lost its scriptwriter and its director.
Muslim Blade reboot?
Because Mahershala Ali is a practicing Muslim, so they've decided to incorporate his religion into the Vampire Hunter for some reason.
I'm sorry, Mahershala. You're an actor. Your job is to portray people who aren't you.
Yeah, but it turns out that they can't even portray people that are Blade because the script was a rip-off of the Underworld franchise, and so they've sacked everyone.
I tell you what, being a Muslim vampire out in the desert in the Middle East must be a pain in the arse.
Drain all these kafar.
Can you imagine staying away from the sun over there?
Yeah, it must be pretty terrible. So I know you wanted
stay indoors and the building that you're in gets bombed and you lose the roof anyway.
I know you wanted to talk about one of your favourite hot properties.
Yeah, the Sandman, which is it's kind of not looking good for it right now, and people like Neil Gaiman. The Sandman, for those unaware, is a legendary comic book series that ran from 1989 through to 1986 or 7. I forget exactly which year, written by the legendary fantasy and sci-fi author Neil Gaiman, whose works, a number of which I have really enjoyed. Earlier this year, my fiancée showed me Coraline, which I hadn't watched before, the film adaptation, which I thought was really good. I really liked the animation style. I've read his book American Gods, which a few years ago when I read it was quite striking and really compelling and enjoyable. And The Sandman is one of the most legendary properties in comic book history. And it got a Netflix adaptation. Of course it got a Netflix adaptation. And can you believe they went the whole hog? You've got race swaps. You've got feminist messaging. You've got, I imagine, trans representation.
Well, you've got Gwendolyn Christie playing Lucifer.
Oh, yes, of course, because Lucifer, who was supposed to be androgynous in the original comic
He was
book.
supposed to be David Bowie.
Yeah, it was supposed to be David Bowie androgynous, not Gwendolyn Christie androgynous. And I'm sure she's a lovely person.
No, she doesn't seem it.
Oh,
She seems woke as hell.
She seems mental
Yeah.
in interviews, but it's not looking good for a second series, and rightfully so, honestly, because Neil Gaiman himself promoted this and was involved in the production. So he's more than happy to stand by and watch as his own creation, his defining creation, it has to be said, is trashed in front of him with his signature of approval on it. I'll put it like this. In the 1990s, when the original run was coming out, obviously it's less one gigantic narrative and more a series of sequentially broken up short stories, all centered around having the main character of Dream, otherwise known as Morpheus, you could call him the Sandman, as kind of an observing character. He observes other people's stories, and you get wrapped into a number of their narratives. And as part of that, one of the things is that there's a witches' coven. And they're having a meeting. And in this witches' coven arrives someone who isn't a witch. They know that this person is not a witch because he is a man. And men can't be witches, but he's determined to let them know he can because he's in a dress and he identifies as a witch. Therefore, he is a witch. To which they all say, "No, you're just a man in a dress. Get lost." And the comic book expects you to be on the side of The witches. The witches, because it was the 90s, and you could look at a man in a dress and go, that's a man in a dress, it's not a woman, and Neil Gaiman fully supported this.
Don't be so mean to Grant Morrison.
I know. I'm sorry. Neil Gaiman himself also is a big fan of G.K. Chesterton, one of the most well-known, was he Catholic?
Yes.
Catholic cultural commenters and authors of his time, well known for having some very culturally conservative views, all of which Neil Gaiman has, of course, gone back on or tried to reframe as actually Chesterton was a secret progressive for the time if you just take in this incredibly esoteric reading of his work like I've decided to do in the past 11 years since I got married to my punk rock wife. And it's not looking good for that either. But Sandman is not looking great. They are trying to debunk a rumour going around that the second series is not cancelled. It is cancelled, but they do it in a very special way because it's not that it's cancelled, it's that it's not been renewed yet. Okay, it's not been renewed yet, and according to Gaiman himself, co-creator of the series, this delay is on account of the fact that many viewers savoured the episodes rather than binge-watching the series. So the Netflix executives are taking their time analysing the numbers as they come in. So Netflix, a subscription service that is based entirely around the business model of getting people to binge-watch shows, had a show where people did not immediately binge-watch it for reasons. It's not that the people watching it probably felt that they were having to force themselves through the absolute drudgery of it. It's that they really wanted to take the time, savour that excellent, excellent content.
Like fermented milk.
So, Neil Gaiman is overdosing on cope. And interestingly enough, the Screen Rant article, despite saying, oh, it's not cancelled, guys, also adds in provisions later on for what happens if it does get cancelled. Interesting assumption. Should it be cancelled, there is some chance that it could be picked up by another network. When a show fails spectacularly, Probably not. However, the enormous cost of the Sandman would be a stumbling block for any potential platform. And amusingly enough, Neil Gaiman will probably have plenty of free time to be able to work on any future developments with it, because his own marriage fell apart after their open marriage broke down.
Oof.
Oof. Oof. Oof. That's just a big oof right there. I mean, what did you expect? These are the people controlling the narratives. These are the people controlling the media that you enjoy, are engaging in open marriages that they say are definitely work. I have children. Of course it's going to work because we have children. Maybe the question shouldn't be when should we have children in this open marriage. It's maybe you shouldn't have an open marriage with children involved, because that is inevitably going to hurt them. It's very irresponsible of you, Neil. And moving further on past the Sandman now, we've got The Witcher, and Henry Cavill, quite notoriously now, is leaving The Witcher for reasons, because
It's rubbish.
it's rubbish, and you can tell he hates having starred in it. He will still be in season 3. They are replacing him with Liam Hemsworth,
Wow, how compelling.
possibly the worst recasting you could go with.
I don't know, Viola Davis?
For season 4, and people are trying to figure out why. I think we all know why, which is that he obviously cared far more about the writing than anybody else did. In this next article here, he was talking about how I wanted to bring as much of Book Geralt into the show that Lauren's vision and the plot would allow, but that's a tricky thing to do, because the plot, as Lauren said, Lauren being the showrunner, is very centered around bringing women to the center of The Witcher.
No wonder I hated
Yeah,
it.
so we're going to take the character that everybody cares about and is interested in, and just toss him aside so we can have some girl power
We'll
in
make
there.
a joke out of Roach's death. Why
Yeah,
don't
we make a joke out of Roach's death, a scene which he had to change specifically because of the fact it was disrespectful to the character, and it just shows that he cared far more about the canon, the plot, and the characters than anybody actually writing these. And as a result, thousands of furious fans have decided to say, well, we don't need to get rid of Henry, we just need to get rid of the writers. And they've signed a petition to replace the writers instead of Henry Cavill.
These won't get much traction,
No.
frankly, because they're
It shows-
always AstroTurf, but the show will probably just get cancelled.
Hopefully. It does just show what the fans actually want, though, and where the problems actually are. And if you're interested, you can sign it here if you just want to try and take part and change, because it's only been a few days. It's already got 222,000 signatures. So there you go, and let's carry on.
Hopefully, instead, he decides to board the Normandy while he's got spare time when returning to Superman, because at the end of Black Adam, he does show back up as Superman, even though they used the wrong theme and they give him a spit curl and the wrong costume. Revive the Snyderverse, please. But Henry Cavill last year was filming The Witcher. If we can scroll down, John, and just have the photo up, please. He was in the Geralt wig and he was reading an alternative script, but the script itself had words from the Mass Effect 3 wiki on it. It spoke about the Geth, Tali'Zorah. So he said, oh, this is my secret project, so he might be boarding the Normandy as Commander Shepard sometime soon. So if you'd like some more nourishing pop cultural content, you can go and subscribe to our website and watch what me and John Wheatley just did recently, which is the politics and philosophy of Mass Effect, or we thought we'd do a little bit of plug here because we're cheap like that. You can go and go to the Comics Corner tab, where we've done one episode so far, The Dark Knight Returns, and this Wednesday, at time of streaming, we're doing The Killing Joke and Arkham Asylum. So keep eyes peeled on the suggestions coming. We'd quite like to have our favourite properties return to their former glory.
If you appreciated that segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content we have on the site, such as the premium hangouts we do, this one on Are There Big Cats in the UK? And if you'd like to find out what else we're putting out, you can follow us on Getter at lotuseaters_com on Getter. Thank you and goodbye.